So I want to step back for a moment and address the argument that this is basically a false concern. And this is an argument I've heard in places as high as the New York Times and so forth. And it basically goes like this: critical race theory is a higher level academic philosophy that is taught at the graduate level and sometimes at the undergraduate level, and it is simply not taught in K through 12 education. And the people complaining about critical race theory being taught in K through 12 are basically just either deceived by propaganda, or they just don't want as much talk about racism and America's the black spots on America's history. They want to just whitewash history, and this is just a false concern, basically. So how would you address that statement?
Yeah, I think that that argument doesn't hold water when you see that the Zen Education Project has a list of thousands of teachers who have vowed to continue teaching this way despite the bans against it that have been legislated or proposed in legislation. The NEA and the AFT, the two largest teachers unions, have simultaneously said it's not happening, but they've vowed to defend teachers who are doing it. And we've also seen webinars, one in Florida, and we've seen another example of a teacher online explaining how they get around the state bans to do it anyway in their states. So these are two completely contradictory notions that can't reconcile. You wouldn't be signing a vow to keep doing something that's been banned if you weren't doing it.
Right. And when we talk about it, you give, the first chapter of your book has story after story of different versions of teachers inculcating a set of ideas, the most common being that people of color are by definition victims of white supremacy. Any black kid or Hispanic kid in class has been harmed by white racism, has reason to fear the racism of white people and his or her white classmates. White people are by definition privileged from their whiteness, regardless of an individual person's story or life path or circumstances. And the macro inequalities between groups in society are the result of discrimination only. And and also there is a sexual identity component to a lot of what's being taught, which is it goes beyond saying it's okay to be gay, it's okay to be who you are, and really is basically an oppression Olympics style ranking of your level of privilege by whether you are straight, gay, queer, pan, and all of the litany of other identities that one can be. So do you have any examples that you can sort of call to mind to give someone a picture of what is the kind of thing that people are objecting to when they're objecting to critical race theory or indoctrination?
Yes. And I do have a bunch of examples that I've collected over a number of years, and I try very hard to collect examples from the right. That happens as well. And in the past, we've had, probably Christian teachers who would be promoting Christian doctrine in class. And to be clear, I'm not opposed to discussing these ideas. What I'm opposed to is expecting students to affirm them, which is what you described when you were taken away to the person of color, event. I think that different ideas can be discussed, but in terms of examples, I actually have so many examples that I've had to group them. I mean, there are lawsuits, there are examples of teachers lying. Here are just, and then I have I have lurid examples, which are things that I just can't believe are even going on in the classroom, like a 6-year-old being asked if they're bisexual. First graders taught about masturbation. I joke that I was taught, how to hold a pencil properly in first grade, but these kids are being taught something completely different. There's a lot of objections to a couple of books I hear about. I won't name the books, but depictions of sex between an adult and a minor, which is a crime. That's when I was a guidance counselor. That was something we were on the alert for, warning like these 18-year-old boys, if they're dating a freshman, to keep them out of trouble. And I would not recommend books encouraging sex between adults and minors. Probably the Antifa teacher is one of it's interesting how some of them are starting to say the quiet part out loud, when their guard is let down, or some of them are even going on YouTube or TikTok to brag about what they're doing in their classrooms. The Antifa teacher got a lot of attention. He was fired. He said he had 180 days to turn his students into radicals, offering extra credit to go to rallies that he approved of. And, that there was also a teacher who lost her job this year on the first day of school in Utah. She told the students that you need to get vaccinated. Of course, she's not a doctor. She said, if your parents don't want you to get vaccinated, you don't have to listen to your parents, because your parents are stupider than you are anyway. This contempt for parents. She said, if you don't agree with me, you should keep your mouth shut, because I'm just going to make fun of you, which the students are picking up anyway. They sort of understand I have to agree with the teacher to be acceptable to the teacher, which I discuss in the section on like the psychology of this, conditional acceptance. You're only acceptable to me if you think what I want you to think, which is not the grounds for any sort of healthy relationship. And then she even said, go ahead and tattle to the administration. They won't do anything anyway. And I think that might have cost her job. I think saying that out loud and she basically dared them to fire her. And they did. We've had in Boston, there was a group of trainers brought in who are charged with unlicensed therapy. There's a lot of therapeutic things going on in the classroom, which I wouldn't even attempt as a trained guidance counselor, as a certified guidance counselor, because I have, there's this concept of competence. And when you're competent at something, sometimes you're so good at it, you don't know how you do it. But sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard of unconscious competence or conscious competence. Like if I were going to try to do something completely new, I would know that I'm not good at it. And that would be conscious incompetence. But I think we have some unconscious incompetence who are trying to conduct therapy. They don't know what they're doing. They're not trained to do it. They're not licensed to do it. They have no authority to be doing it. And there's a lot of stuff going on that supervisors should be saying absolutely no to.
Yeah. So you open the book with this one story about Gabrielle Clark. She was the black mother of a mixed race child where the father was out of the picture, and the child was very light skinned, but it seems they were living in a black neighborhood or at the very least at a majority black school where the kid was the only white looking kid or light skinned looking kid in the class. And the teacher, who seems to be one of these rogue teachers, and this is a high school student, is just basically berating this kid over his privilege and his being white, and basically forcing him to affirm statements about how his whiteness has privileged him as part of the curriculum, where the implied threat, or actually in this case, the explicit threat from her was that he will fail if he does not complete the quote unquote identity confession assignment. And so this is the kind of thing that concerns FIRE when citizens of this country are asked to affirmatively say they believe X, Y, or Z with some kind of implicit threat that matters, like failing a class, forced speech, essentially, of a political nature.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things going on there. There's coercive thought reform. Thought reform is what we call it, and compelled speech or compelled action, which I would call, giving kids extra credit or threatening to punish them if they don't participate in a rally. And this student was actually given a D, or I believe, or D minus, which counted as a failing grade, which impacted his college applications and all sorts of things. It was a required class. They tried to get him out of the class. They wouldn't allow it. So he was basically placed in a situation. He's compelled by law to go to school, right? His mother is required to send him there, and he's not allowed to adhere to, they literally told him, the teacher, that you're going to have to unlearn your Judeo-Christian values. This is a secular public school. And, we have established laws that, no, you don't have to, give, and much of which came out of from lawsuits filed by Jehovah's Witnesses, incidentally, who, for whatever reason, objected to certain activities in the school. And because of them, we have now some very solid case law that protects all of us. So this case is ongoing. She, I believe, has already turned down a settlement offer from the school. She's taking it all the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is what I would be concerned about as someone who plans to have kids and whose kids will, by definition, be of color. I've when I was at Columbia, I took one class by the kind of rogue professor that we're talking about. And it's less of a problem at an elite college where it's a totally elective course and so forth. You're an adult. Yeah. It's not quite a captive audience in the same way, although to some extent it is. But she, there was one class where she just said point blank, all people of color are victims of white supremacy, have been victimized deeply by white supremacy, full stop. And I was so offended that she was speaking on behalf of all people of color, which it would be a ridiculous thing for a person of color to do. And then there was a added layer of irony to the fact that she was white doing this. And I was sitting there in the class saying, no, I honestly do not feel that I have been a victim of white supremacy. Can I cite a story or two from my life that, uncomfortable experiences as a result of being Black? Perhaps. But when I talk to my grandfather and compare that, the America he experienced to the America I experience, there's no utility or truth value from my point of view in saying I am a victim of white supremacy. It would be a lie. It would be a lie calculated only to increase my social cachet within a particular subculture. So I don't claim to speak for all people of color, of course, but there are lots of people of color with that point of view, including this mother of this beleaguered mother. And so to ask someone to affirmatively say, no, I believe this, it goes so against the norm of the right to conscience.